HTML software on the first day, but we kept it just small enough just to get some content out, and we're trying not to get distracted. And the way I'm not getting distracted is that I very purposefully made sure that the grant was done by a pair of programmers. One to keep, so it's me and David Oswald, and I'll tell you a little bit about David, but basically I did this so that I wouldn't go off the rails, and it's working really well. David's a really solid guy. I just met him because he was the inline C++ maintainer for the last 6 or 7 years, and it turns out that he's organizing next YAXI. He lives near Salt Lake, and he's a really great guy. So this summer, he invited me to go to LA when he was living in LA, and I didn't get down there, but this summer, the inline guys, I haven't worked on inline since 2002 until June this summer, and then I've been working on it a lot. So we kind of had an inline revival, and got a new main maintainer for inline C, and David's doing inline C++, and I'm kind of modernizing just the inline framework. So I also race bicycles, and it just so happened that the Masters National Championships, which I participated in, were in Salt Lake City, actually just out in Ogden. And so I went and stayed with David for a week, and we hacked all week, and I did 2 of the events there. And it was so that's when I got to meet him in person. And then we decided that we would do some TPF grants together and see, if we could get any traction. So we spammed the TPF. Actually, we did 4 grant proposals. So I don't think anybody's ever done a pair programming grant before proposal, and I don't think anybody's ever done 4 proposals at once. And we're going to keep doing this every 2 months. The idea is to do proposals that we can actually get done in 2 months, and to try to keep it going. So let me show you the actual work. It's so far I was in Europe for the first 2 weeks after the grant was accepted. Actually, this is a really weird story, but I was in Berlin, and then I went to go stay at Liz and Wendy's house. Wendy picked me up from the train station. She's driving me home, and Liz has good news for you. I didn't even know that Liz is on the TPF grant committee. I had no idea, and they were just making the decision. And then I got there, and it was like 10 p.m. at night, and I'm like, so what's the good news? And she's like, oh, well, I can't tell you till midnight because it's not official yet. But I kind of figured it out by then. Anyway, we didn't get to work on it until about the middle of the month, and so we have about just over 2 weeks of work into this, but it's pretty cool. So I have something called Live Demo to help me give live demos. So see, I've become a fast typer. Okay, so this is the future of writing XS modules. Inline's been around since the year 2000, and you could do things like this. Use inline C, and that would work. And you could actually kind of upload it to CPAN, but what would happen is it actually gets compiled on the first run, and that's not really the way you want Perl modules to install. So the whole idea of the grant is that we make a dance for authors to do that's really simple, so they can just write something like this, but that it gets compiled at the right time. Now, and it also doesn't depend on inline when it gets to the other side. It's just, it has 0 depths and that kind of thing. So I wasn't sure how to do that, because if you use inline in the code, you're gonna, sorry, add a little extra view here. Then necessarily you need an inline module to load, so it has to be somewhere. So I came up with this clever idea. What you do is, say if you're writing Acme Math XS, which I've now written Acme Math XS and Acme Math XS XS, which is the just pure XS version of Acme Math XS. So I could kind of compare the two in parallel and make sure I was doing all the right things. Then if you're actually writing a module, then it's not bad to you just put it in the namespace. You add this in front of, well, you basically put your module name and double colon inline at the end, and then just do exactly the same thing. Now, let's leave here and do some more typing. That was supposed to be, it's not good. There's a way to bust out of here, so. I wanted to show you the inline thing. So the inline thing gets generated, and it always looks like this. It's just 4 lines. I don't know. It's not going quite to It's 4 lines, and it invokes inline for you on the author side. Now, you make a makefile.pl, and there'll be Distilla stuff, and there'll be module build stuff. There'll be a way to do this in all of the frameworks. But basically, you just tell it, this is the language that you're using, this is the file with the code in it, and this is the file that gets generated. And this is the explicit way of doing it. It might actually be shorter, but basically you add this to your meta information. And so it adds this stuff to the bottom of the makefile. And this is an old technique that module install uses. It basically makes it different. It has some rules for making the dist, so when it packages it up, it does something a little bit different. And then it has a couple of things when you actually do the make during the build on the user side. So let's see what happens. We'll make a dist. Sure. Great. Okay. So what happens is when you make the dist, it actually replaces the generated thing on the author side with a generated thing that uses Dynaloader here. The other one used Dynaloader, and that was a bit of a goof. So this is kind of all brand new stuff. So, but I'm going to run it, and then I'm going to say make test, and it works. And then I've already made install on this. Anyway, it's kind of working, and it'll be working. It's I'm actually making modules with it already, and we're going to start converting a lot of other XS modules to it. There's something called the alt namespace where you can take existing modules and make various different versions of it, kind of like on GitHub, where anybody can have somebody else's work or something else. So we're going to take things like JSON XS and show what it would like to be doing it in inline instead. Okay, so. All right, so when we're doing this, David and I, we do it all really public. So we're always on IRC. We use this pair programming setup that I call pair up that I started last fall. And we blog and tweet about anything that we do. And we also use this thing called Termcast where you can actually go to IRC, see what we're saying, and you can actually watch the terminal that we're coding in a web browser. Has anybody seen Termcast here? It's kind of come out of the Perl community. Doi and Jason May are the main proponents or movers of that. So, I really like to do pair programming. I actually, Jim, you were at that talk I gave in Toronto. Were you a part of that? I did actually a pair programming remote talk for the Toronto Perlmongers last year. But I was really kind of getting into pairing up with somebody every day just on IRC. And so pair up was this thing that creates an instant shared environment out in the cloud. And then if you know somebody's GitHub ID, it creates a new account for them. And then you can just start pairing work immediately. And it's also a custom environment with all the things that that the two people like to use and the stuff that you actually want to work on. And then if you combine that with chatting on IRC, so, well, let me just show you. Sorry. This isn't supposed to happen. Start over. So pair up is really just every day. I use Nova to create new cloud instances, Tmux to do the shared stuff, WeChat for the chatting. Sometimes I use Hangouts to talk if it's going to be like an all-day thing, but and SSH and GitHub public keys. So I got a live demo with I actually worked it out with Mike, so I know that it would work. Raise your hand, Mike. So he's going to try to help me here. So, whoops. Hopefully I'm still on the internet. I know this is a little bit small text, but it's for a reason, so don't worry, it's not. Okay, so this is what a pair-up session typically looks like. It's Tmux with a split screen. I have the IRC channel, and I'm already logged into the PPW. My nick is, it's usually Ingy hat and then the other person's nick, but I just use Ingy hat PPW, so that's the nick. I can go over there and say hi on IRC. Yeah. And so what I would do is I'd be and then Mike says something back to me. Right, and then so I would say, oh, I really want to pair up with this guy, so I'll do a pair up, add user, Mike GRB. And this will create, oh, I already did that. I already deleted them too, so live demo stuff. All right, well, let's try it. So basically, Mike's going to run that command that I gave him before. It's basically, he's going to run this command, SSH, Mike GRB. Yeah, do you want it? Hey, I'm going to do it with somebody else. Who has a GitHub account? Why don't you give it a whirl?
It's what?
What is it?
MJ Dominus.
MJ Dominus. Okay, so. Okay, and if you were to type in this command, SSH -T MJ Dominus at, and after the at, type in hack.pairup.net space pairup.
Carrot?
Oh, pair up.
Oh, pair up.
Yeah.
All right, so I got SSH -T, MJ Dominus at hack.pairup.net space pair up.
Space -T. Oh, you have the -T already, right?
SSH -T.
Yeah.
MJ Dominus at hack.pairup.net
Space pairup.
Pair up.
Yeah.
Can we do it?
Yeah, do it.
You want me to verify the key fingerprint?
Yeah.
It's A6.
Oh.
Let's skip that for now. Let's just
All right. So he's in, and now I would ask him to make his terminal a little wider, which he did.
Right.
And if I make my terminal a little smaller, I can see. So that's how Tmux works. Who's used Tmux? Who's used shared Tmux like this?
Wow.
So it's really great. Yeah, so he has control. He can do anything he wants. It's a throwaway thing, but please be nice.
How do I switch to the other?
Control A and then arrow. There you go.
Cool.
So what happened was I went and GitHub publishes all your public keys, and he gave me his GitHub account, and a lot of times it's the same as your IRC account. So usually I just guess, and then and if it doesn't work, then I ask them what their GitHub account is. But yeah, it's a really easy way to get in and hack on something and then get out.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm gonna show you another command. Delete it. Oh, right.
use the terminal sharing, do you find that sometimes both people end up trying to type at the same time and it gets all intermingled?
No, well, I mean, you sort it out really fast.
Okay.
It's like, and you basically, that's why you have the IRC, so that you tell the other guy, chat in IRC, and then he'll say, can I drive, or you'll say, you drive. And so having that window open works really well.
Slick.
Yeah.
Oh, but sorry, I shouldn't have done that, right?
So Control A-D to get out.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have heard me talk about acmeism for the last 6 or 7 years, right? Mostly. So the idea is programming in all languages at once. And so I want to tell you about kind of what makes me tick in programming in general. And here it is. So my end game, and I have 30 years because I'm 50 now. I figure, just in my mind, I think I'm going to hack till I'm 80. It's probably bullshit, but I want to have 100 modules in 20 languages. I have 160 or something in Perl already, but I want to have 120 modules that actually work the same in all languages, or 100 modules that work the same in 20 different languages, and that are maintained and whatnot. That's kind of what I'm trying to do, or see if it's even possible. I'll see how far I can get. Because I really like making modules, and I really think that when I go to other languages, I want those same modules, you know. Those are things that I like. And so I want to share them with other communities as well. So this ability doesn't exist yet, but I hack as though it were. And mostly what I end up doing is hacking in Perl from an acmeist point of view, like I'm hacking in all languages. But I start with Perl because I know Perl really well, and I know I can get at least a little traction with some people. You know, some people like at least hear me out, like you guys for the next some minutes. And I like to involve as many people as possible in the process. Do it publicly on IRC and these kind of pairs. I didn't show you the termcast because I didn't have the server running, but basically you can take any terminal session that you're running, like that pair up, and termcast, broadcast it as a web page, and then so you just give people the URL. And the idea is like you could think about like if you had, imagine 2 people in Moose, and then they're like got this idea, and then they start hacking it, and everybody can watch, and if they get stuck, people can make suggestions, you know, or they can ignore the channel, or they can use the channel. It seems really cool. I mean, what I'm trying to do tool-wise is make tools that simplify hacking, and I'm trying to, I dug about as deep a hole as you could get out, and my idea is that I just climb back, right before I die, I climb back up to the top, write my last line of code, and then I'm dead. So I like creating languages. I've created a few that you know about. Most people know about YAML. Yeah.
So I've tried doing that also, and sometimes I find that like I die like 2 or 3 lines before I get to the top, and then it's all wasted. And does this ever happen to you? And if it doesn't, like, what do you do to?
I've never gotten as far as you've gotten. I've never gotten within 3 lines. Not yet, but I keep trying. I don't give up. So who's heard of JSON-Y? Anybody? It's Matt Trout hated JSON and he hated YAML, and I'm like, well, let's make a new language. And I'm like, what do you want? And then within a few hours, we had it out on CPAN, and a lot of Matt Trout's people use it. It's basically just relaxed JSON. All JSON is JSON-y, but you can get rid of the quotes and the commas and most of the other syntax. And it actually has some good purposes, like for if you want to enter data structures in a command line, one line, it works really well for that kind of thing. So I didn't really like it at all, but I listened to what he said and I spec'd it out and I wrote it using my parsing framework and got it released to CPAN all in hours. So and if my whole tool chain was set up, it would have went out to 20 languages at once instead of just to Perl. So that's kind of the idea. I like playing with old languages. Who's seen the SNUSP talk? I've given it a few times. Nobody here has seen the SNUSP talk? All right, fuck you guys.
Just 2-dimensional brainfuck?
Yeah. 2-dimensional brainfuck ring a bell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah, you know it's called SNUSP.
everybody knows FizzBuzz. So here's FizzBuzz and SNUSP. And I found this on Rosetta Code. And of course, if you run it, it works. And that whole thing, the SNUSP interpreter is written in about 70 lines of Perl that I found in a wiki, and I pulled it out of the wiki and actually released it to CPAN as language SNUSP, so you can play around with that. But the coolest thing about this is it has the debugger, and so the debugger lets you single step through the code. Now, these are, only 8 of those characters are actually part of the program, and these are reflectors, so you can see the current cursor is bouncing off of these reflectors, going over, incrementing a register, which you see up. When it gets to 66, which is needed for a B, it returns down to here, does the next thing. So basically, I can speed this up. This is the initialization phase, because you can only print one character at a time, so you need the characters that you're going to print kind of pre-calculated. Well, that's what they do anyway. This wasn't my program. But now it printed 1 down at the bottom. It'll print 2. And this takes about 150,000 steps. And so we're not going to watch the whole thing, but we'll at least get the fizz. There we go. And then this is the cool thing. This is a loop. See, it's just looping. And it's decrementing the current register. The minus decrements the 37 up there down to 36. Up at the top, you see the current registers. And dot prints a register. That's what it does. So I get this thing down close to 0. And then, of course, what does the question mark do? Well, when the register is 0, it just skips over this and you exit the loop. It's a great language. You know, oh, this is the greatest thing on the bottom. If you want to print the number, say 27, you have to print a 2 and a 7. So you have to take the number, mod it by 10, and div it by 10 to actually get a 2 and a 7 in 2 different registers, and then print those sequentially. And I imagine if you went to 3-digit numbers with this, that it would just, the program would get this big. So it doesn't move to scale. Pretty cool. Which leads me to the last point. It's all about having fun doing all of this stuff. Programming is fun and it's great. So Zilla dist. It's a wrapper around the Zilla, as it sounds like, and I just did it to get a rise out of RJBS, who isn't here, and that whole crew, because they're so into their distilla stuff. And it allows me to code the way that I would code something that was going to go to all languages. Because I've actually written full packages in Ruby and in Python and in Node, and they all have the same parts, but they're all under a little bit different names. So I just picked the best, and I like coding in that style, the best from all of them, and then publishing in the pure style, and that's in the Perl style when I go to CPAN. So like I said, I have about 160 disks, and about half of these have been, over the summer, upgraded to Zilla dist, and sometimes I'll release like 50 releases in a day because, you know, it's just really easy using this Zilla dist tool that I'll show you. And that means that 80 of those modules, I mean, this is since 2000, this is 15 years worth of code, and some of it should die, but the 80 best ones at least are modernized. I mean, they're under modern things. When I get bugs, they get fixed and they get released. So it's really helped me become a good Perl programmer again, even though most of this is written in Bash. So here's what all my layouts look like now. It's a little bit different than Perl. I like to do my changes files in YAML, but I don't publish them that way. They get published in the most standard Perl way, whatever Distilla chooses for me, because I trust that those guys spend way too much time getting stuff perfect for Perl. They all have contributing files that are generated. The core of it is a make file and a meta file. The meta file you actually put in, I'll show you a meta file, but the make file is stock for all of these. The README gets generated from the doc, which is written in Swim. So here, these are my files and these are my layouts. Everyone gets a Travis.yaml file. You can opt out of it, but by default you get a Travis YAML file. So everything is continuously integrated tested. I changed the name of the T directory to test because nobody uses T. I mean, it's stupid. But when I publish it to Perl, to CPAN, it becomes a T directory. Let me show you. Actually, I can just hit tab. I don't even have to fake type anymore. Okay, so now let's actually look. at this. So this is distillate itself, and it uses the same format. If we were to look at the changes file real quick, we'll see it's in YAML. Now, if I do a make, these are all the make targets that I can do. And so I make CPAN. Okay, so this is pretty cool. So now what we have is, this is as if I would have coded it in distilla. If you noticed before, I didn't have a dist.ini. I had a meta file that had basically all the information for dist.ini and a lot of other stuff. I was able to generate the dist.ini for that. The changes file is in there, it's still in YAML. The test directory has become T now. And everything else is basically the same. So now, dist shell will create a dist directory and put me in a new shell in that. So this is actually doing a make CPAN and then going inside of there and doing a diesel build. And then now if we look, at the changes file, now everything's ready to go to CPAN at this point. So no more YAML, etc. It's just a regular diesel RGBS approved Chrome module ready for CPAN. So let's release it. We haven't made any changes, but let's see what happens. Plus, it'll give me one more release for the year. So, add a change logs thing. I don't have to worry about the date. That'll happen automatically. Okay, and then go over to the other side. So all I have to do is that, and then the make will error. I have to run it one more time, and then let's see what it should work. What could go wrong? Get some water. So oftentimes I'll just make changes to programs and then I'll just say make release, and it'll take me through all the processes of committing it back to GitHub, of tagging it and all that stuff. So I rarely even, when I'm really on a roll, I don't even commit stuff to Git and push it to GitHub. It just all happens for me, and then the cow says it's all good. So. Okay, so CPAN Day, I think it was August 18th this year. I didn't really know about it until right before it. Neil Bowers is kind of the guy who's been keeping track of all these CPAN stats and stuff like that. And he put this together. He's from England. Everything's on UTC time. So it actually started for me Friday night at 5 p.m. and ended Saturday night at 5 p.m. So he asked me, because I was doing these crazy amounts of uploads, he's like, hey, could you do a 21-gun salute for, you've read the blog, who's read my blog post on this? Maybe not. So he said, do 21, and I'm like, fuck that. I'm like, oh, I'll get him. I'll do 21 in the first minute. So I actually wrote up something into Zillodist that was a timer, so I could do the make release process, and it would wait at the CPAN upload step for a certain time to happen. And I set them to go off every 2 seconds in the first minute of CPAN Day. I actually made them go 3 seconds early, so in case there was lag, I could make sure I was like the first one in, and boom. So, yeah, I did that. And then I also spent the whole week thinking of little changes I could make so I could do as many releases as possible. And I was shooting for about 500 releases. I didn't really think about what that would take. I worked 24 hours around the clock, slept 4 hours, set up 8 times releases to go off during those 4 hours. And I think I averaged 1 release every 4.5 minutes. It was 317. I think Neil said it was actually 316 by the official statistics. So before this, I had asked him, hey, Neil, what's the most that anybody's ever done in one day? And he's like, oh, 150. And he's like, it was during Foy's module class, and I'm like, oh, you mean for the world? No, I mean for one person. And he's like, oh, let me do some statistical math, so he did it, and he's like, oh, it's 42, but there's a three-way tie for second place. It was me and Ether and somebody else. And the 42 was done like 8 years ago or something like that. I don't even remember who. So now the record is. Well, I think for the world, I forget what was the C10 day? It was more than twice 317, so it was a lot. Massive attack was my idea where I would identify one thing that would apply to maybe 50 different modules, you know, and I would code that as a little bash. So I had like all my repos checked out, and I have this little bash thing that runs a little analyzer on each of the repos and say, oh, does this repo need this? And if so, it puts me in a bash shell, so I can make the change, make release, and get out. So that's how, you know, I had it all scripted even down to the ideas that I wanted to do, and that's how I pulled it off. I'm not going to do it next year. I'm not interested in taking my clothes off again or trying to break this record.
What's an example of something you could do across 50 different repos?
Oh, I don't know. Like, well, one example is on January 1st, that changed the year. Yeah, for all my modules or something like that. But you know, just small stuff. Maybe misspelled word or something like that, or in the doc, something like that. Okay, so here's Swim. Swim is my new markup language. And here's the deal. So Pod is awesome. It has the greatest model. You can write as complex docs as you want in Pod, but it's got the worst syntax in the world. I mean, so you never use it. You never use the real Pod features of Pod. Markdown, a lot of people in Perl are using Markdown these days, and I don't think people realize that GitHub actually accepts Pod as one of their true formats. You can publish readme.pod, and that's what I do for everything now. Because I can publish great looking readmes in Pod, but I don't write in Pod. I write in Swim and convert it to Pod. And Swim is better than Markdown. You can go as deeply net. So one of the problems with Markdown is you can't nest complex stuff. You also can't do data definitions, which is really important for good doc. Like if you're listing all of your methods, it's equals item and then word in Pod. That creates a DD. Which I don't know how many people actually know that that's what's happening, but that's what's happening, and that's what makes Pod doc look really great, and you can't do it in Markdown. And I was hacking on the bash stuff that I'm about to show you, and I'm getting annoyed at that. Right. So I'll just give a quick demo of Swim. I'm going to look at the GitHub repo that I'm going to show you in a bit. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is Swim, and it looks like Markdown more or less. A little bit different. It uses equals instead of pound signs. Pounds mean comment, and then you can actually comment things out in Swim with pounds. So I say that equals is what most wiki markups use for titles. The indent is two-space on purpose because when you do lists of things, they indent that way. Like if I was going to add a bullet point, I would do two-space indent there. And so I'd say foo here. And if I actually wanted to add a paragraph under here, I could keep going. And if I wanted to add a code section under that, I could do that. So it really embraces two-space indent. For nested scoping, and that works out really nice because when you write a wiki markup, you want it to look good. And what's that? I can't read that far.
Halfway.
Okay. You want it to look good in the wiki markup, and you want it to look good as the result of whatever HTML that you convert it to. So here's a list of how I do method. This is the equals item stuff, the method lists. And what I'm going to show you here is. This is the first GitHub open. It's going to open up the. So this is for a bash project, but the README is readme.pod, as are all of my published docs to GitHub now. I only use pod because that's the only way I can get a great model and put anything that I want. Because GitHub doesn't support Swim. If they did, I could go even better than pod. But they don't. So they support Pod, which is I can do all kinds of great stuff in. And this doc just looks freaking fantastic, you know. And you could not do this in Markdown. You could get maybe kind of close, but you'd have to fake a lot of stuff. So, yeah, that's fun. Okay, so I'm not going to say too much about PegX, but basically PegX is Perl 6 rules for every other language that has regexes, which is every language, ironically, except Perl 6 doesn't actually have, you know, what we think of as normal regexes. They have room in the language for it, they just haven't implemented it. And it's a PEG parser, so PEG means, you know, it's a top-down recursive descent parsing style that's been popular for the last 8 years, and so you combine PEG and regex and you get PegX. But I will show you real quickly the swim. Well, first let me show you a, so these are all the grammar repositories that I've created for PegX so far, and I want to get about 100 syntaxes fully defined in Swim because in PegX, because the nice thing about PegX is that it's really easy for other people to understand and hack on, which is kind of the point. So let's look at a JSON grammar for okay. So that's the whole grammar for a JSON parser, and I have modules that use this. I put this in a separate repo because I use this for several languages, so it has to kind of live separately than any particular language. You can see how JSON is a value. It used to be that JSON top level was a hash or an array, but that's not the case anymore. Is everybody aware of that? There's a new RFC that came out this summer that actually makes single scalar values valid JSON. So, which is kind of a clean thing. It's good that they did that. And we adjusted this grammar to, when I found out, David actually told me that, David Oswald told me about that. And we adjusted the grammar to be more compliant than some Perl modules. So you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. It's pretty friendly. So let me show you what it compiles to. So that's really just a sugar syntax for this. So these are the real regexes, and they can get quite huge. They're composable. So regexes in PegX can have references to other regexes that get included and built up, and it's really nice. Anyway, let me just show you real quickly the Swim grammar. So the whole Swim language is defined by this grammar. And okay, the other thing about PegX is it's acmeist, and that's the whole idea, is that I create a grammar and then I have a framework in 20 languages once I have PegX ported to 20 languages. But this is the whole definition of the language. So if you find a bug in it, you can fix it in the grammar here, and that's really great. In fact, I'd like to do one for pod in the same style. Okay, so Ingy. So I've been working on something called CDENT. It's kind of the new name for CDENT, really. But the basic idea is that it's a programming language. It has no syntax. It's defined as a model. So think of if you had a data structure that had all of the information to produce 20 equivalents in 20 different languages. That's possible. I mean, it might be gross, but you could do it, right? If I gave you a program, you could do that. And then any syntax that compiled into that data structure is then a new programming language. So CafeScript is a syntax kind of based off a CoffeeScript that can actually compile into the Ingy thing. And all of this is vaporware, but let me show you something. No, I mean, some of the stuff, most of the stuff I'm showing you is actually real, and it wasn't real a few years ago. And this is starting to take form. So, let's see. Where I put it? Anyway, let's go. So I came up with this Pig Latin project in September, and this is pretty cool, because watch this. I'm going to type in make test. Hopefully this works. This is an algorithm that uses all of the basic idioms of programming, of really simple programming, about 20 or 30 idioms, depending on how you count them. And it's a Pig Latin translator. It uses an object-oriented, class-based thing. I mean, it's really minimal. It has one method that translates an English phrase to a Pig Latin phrase. And so, let's look at the, so that, I have it done in 16 languages, and it just passed all the tests on that. Maybe so, let's look at a Perl one. So what, each of these includes a library, instantiates a module, calls a new method on that to instantiate it, and then calls the convert method. So they all, I try to do them in all the same style. I don't really use the best features of each language. I try to do them in a way that I can generate the code from some other code. So, and then let's look at the, okay. I'll make it one smaller. So that's all of the code. So we had a library. It has we have a class. We have an attribute. We have regexes. We have an iterator, a callback iterator in the form of math. We have string functions, split and join. We have all these things. We have concatenation. We have assignment. We have local variables, that kind of thing. So I have a list of all the idioms. I think you read me, but it doesn't matter. So let me show you.
Ingy, are you saying that this PM file that you showed us was generated from?
No, it was handwritten so far, but I've only been at this for. So I've handwritten it and got it to pass tests and be exactly equivalent in 16 languages. And then I wrote it once in YAML, in what I call Ingy YAML. So this is all of the information that I see that is needed to generate all 20 of those. And so the next step is to generate, all 16, is to generate, and there's a few more I want to add, so I use the number 20. So the next step is to generate all 20 backends from that, including that Perl one we just saw. And then this is the syntax that I call cafe, that would actually be the syntax that I would use as to write new modules or new classes that would get converted to Ingy, that would get converted to 20 backends. And it's, I mean, it doesn't matter if you like it or not, because and you can just use, so PegX would produce this. You could produce PegX or whatever to produce your own syntax that you like better. Or, it could look more like whatever you like. So that's Ingy. And so my idea is, even if Ingy doesn't become popular, I at least want to write PegX and YAML in Ingy so that I can get those out to 20 languages. So I can bootstrap myself by writing, because the PegX, thank you, the PegX code is actually quite small. So finally, we get to the talk, GitHub. And we have 5 minutes left. Let me just show it to you. So it's a Git command line. It's just a Git command that lets you do all of GitHub from the command line. So I was to say GitHub repo. It's going to tell me about the repo that I'm actually in. If I say GitHub user MJ Levinus, it's going to tell me about Mark. If I say GitHub repos, okay, it's going to give me all those repos. If I say, now if I cd out of here, and I say GitHub user, it's going to give me stuff about, sorry. It'll give me stuff about me. It knows it's me from the config file that it makes. Let me, I'm going to say GitHub clone one of Mark's things. Stick.
Rick and I did that together.
Who's that?
Rick, Cygnus.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's part of, we did it on the way to the meeting. It's really actually excellent, and I should have given a talk about it today, but I didn't think of it.
Well, I'm giving a talk for you right now.
Thank you.
Part of it. So if I say GitHub user inside of stick, it's not going to tell me about me, it's going to tell me about Mark because I'm inside of it. If I say GitHub repos, well, I'm inside of Mark's thing, so it's going to give me his repos. Now here's a cool thing. This is where it gets really powerful. If I say ---- raw, it's just going to give me those names. If I pipe that into something like GitHub, okay, so actually, let me show you GitHub repo. How many stars does this repo have? 1. So I can say GitHub star. And since I'm in this repo, it will star that one. Now if I say GitHub repo, it should have 2 stars. Yes. If I wanted to star all of MJD's stuff, then I could just pipe this into GitHub star minus. So that's going to read, raw gave me those things one at a time. This is basically just going to put MJ dominus A, MJ dominus B onto all these. So and the slowness of this is actually just GitHub's API. In fact, and I don't really want to do that, so. I could leave a couple of them start. There we go. Suck some and still start. Let me show you all of these commands. If you put the -b, it will show you the actual curl command used. It'll star out the token that gets put in there. So I didn't leak my token to you. If you there's actually, if you use -T, it'll show the token, so you can actually copy it and use it. If I show -O, it will actually show me the payload that I got back from GitHub, right? So now the interesting thing is it's all in JSON, and this is Bash. Bash, how do you do JSON and Bash? Well, you write a Bash library. And so at first I just kind of grep things out in a weird way, but I'm like, no, if I'm going to do this in Bash, I'm really going to have to do it right. So I wrote JSON Bash, and so there's nothing to load it into in Bash. There's no hashes and hashes of hashes. So the trick was that use this, for every leaf node in the tree, you print a line. You have key, hard tab, value, and the keys are separated in a path format. So you can, it's really pretty well thought out. I'll show you, the last thing I want to show you is make test. Oh, sorry. So that looks a lot like curl testing, but it's not. It's a test suite written in Bash using test more for Bash, which I ported. So if we were to look at the test suite, we could see there's these .t files. But if we were to go into one of them, we would see that it was all done using Bash. I also have something called Bash Plus that gives you a use command. So you can actually use other Bash modules. And I actually have something called bpan that I'm working on, so you can actually download all these modules. And so I'm going to end there and take questions. Oh, actually, yeah, if you guys work for cool companies that have good contracting gigs, I'm looking right now, so approach me. And but for now, I'm going to take questions. So, yes.
Does the inline thing necessitate a new version of MakeMaker or Module Build?
No, it doesn't necessitate everything.
I saw you were making new make targets. I just didn't follow how you were doing that.
The same way that module and install does it. I mean, we can talk later, but yeah. More questions? Come on. You guys knew all that stuff?
Super stunned.
When are
Stand
you
there
writing
for 5
Pearl
minutes.
dot sh?
What?
Said, when are you writing Pearl dot sh?
You do a grammar parser and bash.
We write Pearl and back.
No, but I do want to have a Perl 5 regex grammar for sure. I mean, that would be a bit of work, but I mean, you know, I mean, Perl ego is all Perl code, but it would be nice if that could actually be boiled down to kind of go more into a grammar form, so more people could hack on it. Stuff like that. Yeah.
The git hub command and suite and all that, do we just go to your GitHub and pass over there?
Yeah, I plan to just show that real quick. So, and that's a good question. There's 3 ways to install this. The first 2 are that you get the GitHub repo, and it's ingy.net/GitHub, git-hub. And all you have to do is source an init file that's in the repo, and if you if you source the path to that in your bash RC, then that's installed. That's the best way to install it because you get command completion, you get man pages and everything. You can sudo make install it if you have to for a more system-wide thing, and you won't get command completion automatically. And then the other way to do it, this is hilarious. Somebody on IRC said, "Can we just make it on cpan so I can just cpan m this?" And so I actually did. So if you can cpan m app :git :hub. So maybe that's where you want to start. You know, if you just want to play around with it, just install a Perl module and it instantly installs. Question in the back.
Yeah, is bash module different than shell archive? Sharp.
What's that?
The bash module different than shell archive?
Is a bash module different than a shell archive?
Yeah.
I don't really even understand that.
You know what
Is
shell
that like?
archive is? That's sharp.
Oh, yeah. It's just. I mean, that's an archive, right? I mean, that's more like tar, right? Archive is the predecessor to tar.
That's an old shell archive thing that no one's using.
No, this is just straight bash scripting. Yeah. So I mean, it's just shell commands. It turns out that bash is really cool. I mean, when I programmed this thing in bash, I started down this path because somebody else had done a git command in bash, and I'm like, I'm going to program this exactly as I would do it in Ruby or Perl. And every idiom, I would just think, what would I do next in Perl? And then I would ask Google, how do I do this in bash? And I got all the way through it. So I'll take one last question.